As I promised last time, our guest tonight is Republican Congressman William Martini from the 8th District in New Jersey. Bill is an attorney and a Passaic native who's serving his first term in Congress. Bill, pleased to see you.
Nice to see you, Tom. Thanks for having me.
My first question is, what committees do you serve on, Bill, in the Congress?
Well, I serve on two committees. I serve on the Government Reform and Oversight Committee, and I serve on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. Most people know what the Transportation Infrastructure Committee is all about. That's basically, it has jurisdiction and responsibility over maintaining our harbors, our national highways, our rails, our airports, and all of those responsibilities. And the Government Reform and Oversight Committee in this Congress has been particularly active because its jurisdiction and responsibilities to oversee various agencies and branches of the executive branch and make sure that things are running smoothly and that money are spent properly and programs are administered properly. So that committee was the one that was involved with the Travelgate incident, and also it's the one that right now is having hearings on the FBI file privacy violations that's recently occurred.
Well, let's take them one at a time. Transportation Committee, Route 21. It's an old nemesis here in New Jersey.
It certainly is. Growing up in the city of Passaic, where I was born and raised and went to high school, I lived on Temple Place in Passaic, which is about a block from the stadium. And I remember as a young boy in the 50s, my family being concerned that Route 21 might come through our property. So it's that old, but it's still not completed, as you well know. Right. There's a link of about 1.5 miles from downtown Passaic to Clifton that's not completed. It's an essential project that needs to be completed. It's one that I've been working hard on, and it's one that, frankly, I think very soon we'll be addressing in terms of releasing press information about the progress being made there. It's particularly important now, by the way, since we have this beautiful arts center going up in Newark, which will be completed in about a year. And if people are going to use that arts center and have access to it, particularly people from North Jersey, it's vital that they be able to get on Route 21 and not have to get off into back streets and back neighborhoods of Clifton and Passaic to get back on the highway. So completing that 1.5 mile link of Route 21, it will be very important to making sure the Arts Center is utilized and successful as well.
As I recall, that goes right into the Arts Center, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It passes the Arts Center. It goes right past the Arts Center.
Very convenient, yeah.
And so obviously it'll make traveling to the Arts Center much more convenient. It'll help to revitalize Newark, but also it'll eliminate a lot of congestion and pollution in the city of Passaic and Clifton, which the neighbors there have been tolerating way too long. And but I think in the next couple of years, some construction is going on now. My efforts have been to complete that project, and I think we're going to find that we'll be successful in that effort. Well,
there's a couple of areas I'd like to discuss with you concerning mostly the urban areas for the most part. Welfare and welfare reform. Could you give us your views on that and what your record is on it?
Sure. I mean, I think for all too long, many Americans have felt that the welfare system that has been enacted in this country for so many years has been full of waste and a lot of abuse and not really adequately addressing the problem. We certainly do need welfare for appropriate cases. People, all of us, have setbacks in lives, and the government should be there to help in those truly cases where people need help. Unfortunately, the process has been abused, and the commitment of the federal government, this Congress, has been to once and for all address a meaningful welfare reform bill, which we did. And we passed that in both the House and the Senate. And regrettably, even though the president, when he had campaigned, said he was for a welfare reform, he vetoed that bill twice. The House is still committed, and the Senate and Congress is still committed to once again try to address that bill. It's not cruel on children, and it's not going to hurt any disabled. There will be welfare for truly disabled people and for children, but it's intended to get people who are able-bodied people off the welfare rolls and into workfare. And it's a common sense thing that should have been done years ago, that this Congress committed itself to doing, but this president has vetoed twice already.
Well, I think you just struck on something that has nothing to do with legislation, but common sense. Do I sense a lack of that perhaps here in either the bureaucracy or the way we do things? For instance, the welfare system. People aren't concerned with giving it to the needy, as you pointed out, but they are concerned about policing it and those people who are taking it that don't deserve it, if you will.
Sure.
Are we doing anything about that?
Well, we haven't been doing anything about it, and that's the problem. Congresses in the past, no Congress in recent time has been willing to have a public debate on welfare reform and then pass a bill, which this Congress did do. And we passed a bill that's fair, but also saves money and also cleans up the waste, fraud, and abuse that exists in that program. People here in Essex County, part of my district, know all too well of the many situations that have been uncovered over the years where a person can collect welfare in Newark but then go over to Staten Island and collect welfare. Yes. And that's the kind of abuses that we have to get rid of. But we also have to make sure that we try to get people off of welfare and into workfare and working. And, you know, a number of governors throughout this country, governors from Wisconsin and Massachusetts, initiated these reforms independent of the federal government, and they've been greatly successful in making sure that people are getting off of welfare and that you're not finding the homelessness on the streets in those communities any greater than anywhere else, for instance.
Even self-esteem, so to speak.
And in fact, I think, you know, a work ethic is something that increases people's self-esteem, and frankly, it really is common sense. I'm pleased to say this Congress did in fact pass that bill. I think before the end of this session we may very well present it to the President still again. And this is you know, the same President who in 1992 when he was campaigning said we need to change welfare like you never knew it. And yet he has not adopted any of these welfare reforms. And it's easy to say, well, it's to scare people and say, well, it's cruel on children. And that's been his excuse. Right. And it's purely that. It's been an excuse. If for a moment I thought it was going to be cruel on children, I would never support it. But is it a reform that will encourage people to get out and work? Yeah, it is a reform to do that.
The next item is, what about immigration? Legal and illegal. How do you stand on that?
Well, I've been very clear on that. In 1994, when I campaigned, I said there was a need for Congress, and that this truly is a federal responsibility. Protecting our borders and immigration is a jurisdiction of the federal government. And yet, the federal government in recent years has been remiss in, one, enforcing our borders, and also establishing a true immigration policy in terms of not allowing people to come here into this country illegally. We've allowed our borders to be open borders, particularly in the Southwest and in Florida. And by the way, New Jersey is number 5 in the country in terms of having an illegal immigration problem.
That's why I asked the question. It is an issue here in New Jersey.
It's clearly an issue in New Jersey, and it's an issue in my very district, the 8th Congressional District. In fact, only 4 weeks ago, there was a newspaper article announcing that 39 people were arrested out of a business in downtown Passaic. 39 people were arrested as illegal aliens having jobs in that business. Now, what does that do? That takes away jobs from people who are on welfare who are looking to get a job, and it also takes away jobs from our newly arrived illegal immigrants who truly want to get to work and get ahead, and they are not able to because these jobs are being occupied by illegal immigrants in all
that
cases.
Thought.
Good.
We'll be right back.
Thanks.
Thank you. Welcome back. You were making a point on immigration, Bill.
Well, basically, we were talking about illegal immigration and the drain it has on a lot of our federal funds and our federal taxpayers' dollars. And frankly, in 1994, when I campaigned, I said that we had to take a strong position in prohibiting illegal immigration. And as a congressperson now from this district, we have voted for an illegal immigration bill that will in fact enforce our borders, but also eliminate some of the incentives that people do come to this country for, which are the wrong incentives. That things like illegal immigrants getting access to our social benefit system, our social welfare system, our food stamps, we should eliminate that. They don't pay into the system, so they shouldn't be the beneficiaries of that. And then there's also this issue of dealing with whether or not the states should pay for the education of children of illegal immigrants. And my position has been, and the position of a lot of people, it's a common sense position, is at a time when our taxpayers are finding it difficult to find the funding for many public school systems, it's unreasonable to expect that we should also then require them to pay for the education of children whose parents came here illegally, broke the law, and frankly are not paying into the system. And so it really is a common sense issue, and it's intended to be prospective and to send a message to the world, basically, that no longer, if you do come here illegally, can you expect to enroll your child into the public school of Nutley or Belleville and expect that the local taxpayers are going to pay for that education. And by sending that message out, we will deter a lot of people who may think that if they can get here in some way, they're going to get their children an education. But there is a legal way of coming here and waiting and getting on the list, as everyone in America, most everyone has immigrated here. There's a legal way of immigrating which we should respect and honor and encourage. And that's really what this issue is all about.
Okay. Some questions on some other areas. Would you kind of touched upon there? What about health care and health insurance? What exactly are your views on that? Well,
right now, we're faced with this Congress is right now trying to get a health care reform bill to the President. It's passed the House, it's passed the Senate, and basically it's in a conference now between the House and Senate to try to iron out some differences to present it to the President. What the bill really does is try to make health care more accessible and more affordable for a large segment of people who are out there who right now are in small businesses, self-employed, and are fearful, for instance, of leaving their job, particularly, for instance, if they have a prior existing illness. The best example is, let's say you're in a job right now and you have some kind of an illness that's been detected, but you have an opportunity to move to a better job, to improve yourself. Right now, you would run the risk, if you move to that job, that the insurance company for that new employer may reject you and will not pick you up. So a lot of people are frozen in their present jobs because they are fearful of moving to a new job because they won't have health insurance. The bill is intended to stop that. It would be illegal for that new insurance company to stop covering you, and they would have to provide you with health care and coverage. So that's one of the issues. The other issue is if you have a prior existing illness and you're seeking a job, no longer can an employer's insurance company turn you down because you have an illness, and they'd have to accept you into the pool. The other good part about this bill is to try to allow self-employed people and small businesses to form their own pools so that they can go out and buy insurance less expensively, the same way insurance for General Motors or for IBM is less expensive.
Well, I think, you know, insurance or health care seems to be the only business in the country where the costs are escalating and competition never drives the cost down, the cost to the consumer. Is there something that I'm missing there?
Well, no, I think your point is well taken, although there has been some evidence in recent years that there's some stabilization of the extremely high rise in cost that was going on for too many years in the healthcare provider network. And so there's some evidence that it's at least trying to stabilize. Level off, but it's not enough, to be very honest with you.
It's
to the average working person out there, it's too expensive, it's too costly, and this bill, which is called the Castlebaum-Kennedy bill, is a bill which, frankly, will help to alleviate the rising costs and make healthcare more affordable and accessible to
everybody.
To most everyone. It's still not going to solve the world's problems in that area, but it's a big step in the right direction, and it's very different than the step in the direction of 1993, where we had a very convoluted, complex plan that would have cost the American taxpayers major increase in taxes and never got out of the committees and voted on anyhow. Okay,
let's move right along here. Another topic that's completely different. What about crime? Crime in America seems to be on the front pages every day, more and more so.
And it is, and I think one of the greatest responsibilities of governments is to assure that we live in a safe environment, to be sure that the most vulnerable in our society, our seniors and our children, are able to go out of their homes without the threat of being preyed on. And quite frankly, that has been a trend in too many recent years that still has not been addressed adequately. And I could speak from the perspective of having been both a prosecutor and a federal prosecutor, a state prosecutor, and even a defense attorney. And frankly, the lessons I learned from that experience were very simply this. One of the best ways to fight crimes is to have a system which imposes strict, firm sentences expeditiously after people's rights are protected and all, but once the person is convicted, make sure that they get a strict, serious sentence, particularly for a violent crime. And that's a message I learned as both a prosecutor and even as an attorney representing people accused of crime. The one thing they used to say was, you know, Mr. Martini, I'll plead guilty, I'll do this, but I don't want to go to jail. And I learned early on that going to jail was a deterrent. It meant something. And so we have to have a system, and that's why I voted for a crime bill which will make sure sentences are firmer and make sure sentences are more expedient and people are sentenced to jail in a violent crime situation. We also voted for a crime bill which will no longer allow someone sentenced to the death penalty, and I support the death penalty, but no longer allows someone sentenced to a death penalty to have an appeal process that could take 17 years.
Or 20 years or whatever.
In New Jersey right now, we've had a death penalty since 1981. And yet we've had people on death row since that very time, exhausting or filing more and more appeals.
Well, on that issue and several other issues, it also perhaps goes back to welfare and health care to some degree. There seems to be a word that everyone seems to dance around, and it's responsibility. Who's going to be responsible for the different things? Am I right on that, or is that something that you see?
Well, you know, government has a role. There's no question, and I like to say that the government's role is to try to create an environment in which people who want to work, who want to try to advance themselves, particularly if they're able-bodied and not the disabled and not the particularly elderly, government should protect them. But people who are able-bodied, the government's role really is to create an environment in which they can get out and pursue their dreams.
So they have a responsibility.
And work.
Yeah.
And that's my point. Right. I think over recent years, we've allowed ourselves to fall prey to the thinking that government would solve all of our individual and our community problems, and it was the federal government that was going to do this, and therefore let's have another program for another need that really was a responsibility of a lot of either individuals, communities, whether local, state, or even some of our charitable institutions. So it's a balance. And I think I think this country for years had that balance. But I think in recent years we've lost that balance, and responsibility is part of it. That we are part of a community, part of a society, and therefore each of us has some responsibility. Particularly if we're not disabled and we're not elderly and we're not young, that's the burdens that we individually have as well.
Thank you. At that stage, we'll be back in just a moment. We're back again with Bill Martini. Bill, there's a couple of questions I'd like to ask, but one is really sticks in my mind. What do you consider yourself? A conservative, a liberal, a moderate, a centrist, whatever label you call it?
Well, it's interesting when I hear a question like that because my immediate response is, and I think rightfully so, is that labels are best left for canned goods or cereals or whatever. If you recognize what our position and what our responsibilities are, we deal with hundreds of issues as a representative in Washington, hundreds of issues. And on given issues, I think we reflect one point of view, and we think, we listen to our constituents, and then we react. As best I could describe it or make an answer to that, I think on issues of once and for all getting rid of wasteful government spending and coming up with a responsible federal budget and not wasting taxpayers' dollars and seeking some tax relief. You'd call me fiscally conservative, and my record would bear that out. I've had good ratings from the National Taxpayers Union, the Citizens Against Government Waste, Chambers of Commerce, and Concord Coalition, and so those people who rate fiscal votes have rated as well. On the other hand, with respect to the environment and my votes with respect to making sure we have a safe environment, we've been endorsed by the Sierra Club. And so my record with the environment has been very good, enough so that they acknowledged my voting record and have endorsed me. And also, if you're talking about working people's issues, particularly even some of the local labor people like the carpenters and the ironworkers, all people who are really out there looking for a fair wage, want to work, who are very conservative people. These are people who don't want to waste their taxpayers' dollars, and all they want is a fair chance to work and make a fair living for their effort. With respect to them, I've received about 10 or 11 endorsements from local labor unions, even though the national labor leaders have said that they're going to challenge Republicans across the board this year. But I think so. If you look at that record, you'll see somebody who's been concerned about the deficit spending of this nation and the debt it's imposing on our children and our future, and wasteful taxpayer spending, but also mindful that all of that would be for naught if we don't make sure we have a safe, clean environment to live in, and also mindful that working people who want to work need to get good wages and need to have a fair chance to work, and that's what my record would reflect.
On one more issue that we haven't touched on, which probably is one of the most important, education. Where do you stand in education? Have you given any thought to vouchers or anything of that nature?
Well, we have a problem, I think, overall with our public education system in this country. The costs are astronomical, and many parents are concerned about what are the returns for those costs. I think if we saw that the returns in terms of the student testing and everything were good, then they wouldn't have a problem with the expense of the education, particularly here in New Jersey. The problem becomes when you're a parent and you see the expense for the local public school education, and then you find that the returns don't seem to be there. You're absolutely right. Education is a key to a lot of things. It opens up a lot of doors. I had a problem with some of the positions of a number of my colleagues in Congress this year, and I voted my conscience in that incident, and I felt we should not reduce the funding in education to the degree that some were proposing, and I voted against those bills and supported putting more funding back into education and not reducing it by some of the suggestions that people had. That doesn't mean there's not room to improve in terms of the federal government of the federal Department of Education, which is really a bureaucracy. What I'd like to see is that the federal money truly get into the programs, and if there's going to be federal money involved with education, it should get to the local level and not be spent in study programs at the national level.
Right, to the students.
Right. Okay. So, but it's something that we have to always be mindful of making an adequate level of funding for education.
A couple of questions before we kind of wrap it up here. What about on the international scene? Where do you think America belongs? World leader, world policeman?
Well, I think we have to be careful. We have to strike the right balance. I don't think we should be sending American troops and risking American lives just anywhere in the world. If there's for instance, I think it's become all too common of a practice when there's something going on in the world that we're not pleased with, and that we send American troops, risk their lives, and not to mention the cost involved behind that kind of a policy. So I think we have to be very careful. And so the balance, you have to, I think, address each one of those issues on its merits and make the decision as they come up. But we do have a role in terms of a leadership role in the world. And the best way we can, I think, demonstrate to the world our role of leadership is by showing us as a strong, free democracy that people will respect throughout the world. And frankly, being sure that our defenses are firm and we have adequate defenses, but also making sure that our democracy and our freedoms are there so people respect us and want to emulate us. What do you think
about the stance they've recently made in the UN, which is the first time that I've ever noticed becoming public about Boutros Boutros-Ghali. Do you have any thoughts on that at all?
No, I wouldn't want to prematurely. To be honest with you, it's something that's just surfaced in the past few days. We're getting some briefing materials on it, and I think it would be irresponsible to prematurely make a decision on that until we see all of the information that we'll have probably by next week.
Okay. Well, I think I'd like to thank you. And is there anything you'd like to say in closing?
No, I just think that in closing, it's a very important time for America's future, and I think Congress is trying genuinely to address some of the things that have been neglected, and we are very committed to wanting to come up with an honest, balanced budget for a change that will address welfare and will eliminate illegal immigration, and still be sure we provide good services where necessary. And that's a commitment I've had. My record reflects that, and it's one that we're proud of, and one that I think best reflects the values and beliefs of the overwhelming majority of people in the 8th Congressional District. So we're working hard and trying to get some things done, and we have.
Bill?
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you very much. Good luck in the election.
Thank you very much.
Be sure and join us next week at the same time. Thank you.